All right. Well, thank you everyone for showing up today and coming to hear me talk about our rare earth project, Monumental's rare earth project in Mexico. Monumental Minerals is a critical metals company. We're exploring for lithium in Chile and rare earths in Mexico. Okay, so first, just a forward-looking statement. You've seen these before, just the standard wording. So before I get into the talk, I'm just going to talk a little bit about here our management and directors. We have myself, Jamil Seder. I'm the CEO and director. I've worked for different companies, whether they're majors, explorers, juniors, and also for mining services companies. Then we have Max Sally, who's VP Corporate Development and a director. Chris Raffel, who's our QP and a director. And Michelle DeSecco, who is Audit Chair Committee Director, and Ryan Chung, who's our CFO. I'd also like to say something that, also we have our team here in Mexico, which has been a huge part of this project, and that's Craig Gibson and his team with Prodamin. Okay, so Monumental Minerals is, as I was saying, it's a critical metals company. We have 3 projects in the Americas. We have 2 lithium brine projects, which I'm not going to talk about too much today. And then we have the Jemi heavy rare earth project, which is in northern Mexico in Coahuila State. The company itself, the thesis of the company is to look for, to discover, to advance, and to explore for critical metals that are needed for the energy transition. So this is lithium for batteries, specifically for EVs, and the heavy rare earths that go into magnets that go into the motors of these EVs. We clearly see that this is a developing sector, and that we, as we move forward to more sustainable transportation, that we're going to move away from ICE vehicles or internal combustion engine vehicles and towards EVs more and more. So what are rare earths? There are really 17 elements on the periodic table that have very similar geochemical characteristics. They tend to all sort of stick together and all kind of enter into the same minerals, enter into the same systems. And so what we have here that are the most interesting, and the most interesting to this energy transition, are terbium, dysprosium, for our heavies, and for our lights, neodymium and praseodymium here. And a lot of projects as well, including ours, also has significant tantalum and niobium. So when we talk about rare earths, a lot of people will say, well, are they really rare? Well, they're actually not that rare. They have the same crustal abundance as something like antimony, tin, tungsten, moly. They're certainly more common than elements like silver or indium or gold or other precious metals. But what is rare about them is that it's very difficult, as it's very uncommon to see rare earths at concentrations that are economic. So where do we find rare earths? Well, commonly we'll see them in carbonatites from 2 to 8% total rare earth oxides. We'll see them in alkaline intrusives, which Jemi is, and we'll see 0.5 to 1%. What makes the alkaline intrusives generally different from the carbonatites is the fact that they have a lot of heavy rare earths, where the carbonatites are only lights. And then we have saprolites and clays, and these are very common in China. We tend to see them in China and Myanmar, but the concentrations are also quite low, and the grades are quite low, so anywhere from 0.03 to around 0.2% total rare earth oxides. And of course, this translates into how much each ton of ore is worth. So for carbonatites and alkaline intrusions, we have a range of about 250 to 750 per ton of ore, and it's about 1/10 of that for the clay. There's a few other places where you might find rare earths in mining byproducts, mining waste, and other types of waste. And so there are quite a few different avenues to to collect them, but for the most part, it is alkaline intrusions and carbonatites and the clays. So why are rare earths important? Well, first of all, if we look at neodymium and praseodymium, our light rare earths, they have to go into the magnets, and these are neomagnets, or they might be considered permanent magnets. They might be called high performance magnets. I don't know. But no matter what, you need to have light rare earths in your magnets if you want to be running a electric motor, or a high performance or very efficient electric motor. You can also add terbium and dysprosium, your heavies, and what that will do is it'll increase the operating temperature of your magnets or your motor from about 80 degrees Celsius all the way up to 160 Celsius. So for example, if we think about an EV, like a Tesla EV, an all-wheel drive Tesla, at the front, the motor will have only light rare earths, and then the motor in the back will have a mixture of lights and heavy rare earths. So in terms of applications, I've talked a lot about EVs, but it's not only EVs that you'll find rare earths. You can find them in wind turbines, water pumps, any kind of electric motor where you need a small size and a lot of energy. And the value behind this is that, right now, if we think about the auto manufacturing industry, they plan to put it somewhere in the order of $500 billion worth of R&D into new projects, new EVs between now and 2030. So we do see that we're going to see a continual ramp up in EVs that are available, the technology, and we want to be ready for that with this project. So in terms of value for rare earths, right now we see that between now and beyond 2030, we see that rare earths will be in a situation where supply will be deficient and demand will be much higher than that. And what also makes the Jemi project quite nice is that 94% of the market share, or the market value for rare earths, is really in those 4 rare earths that I was talking about that go into magnets, whether it's dysprosium, terbium, neodymium, and praseodymium. And again, if we look at this chart right here, wrong one. If we look at this chart right here, we see that over the next several years, the dominant growth is going to be that EV sector. Now, again, if we're thinking about rare earths, we also have to be thinking about geopolitical situations. And, the elephant in the room here is China. China is dominant. China controls 100% of the world's heavy rare earths. They're all mined in either China and Myanmar. And they also the policy that China has been to protect this industry and this supply chain. So all the way from shovel level, and because, compared to, let's say, Saudi Arabia is endowed in oil, China is endowed in rare earths. And so they really want to protect that, not only at the shovel level, but they really want to protect it all the way down to the manufacturing. And they've done very, very well at it. But one of the issues with China is that, a lot of countries have political issues with China. We can talk about Canada, the U.S., Australia, perhaps Mexico as well. There are some political concerns, and this makes people uneasy. So you have a country basically that has a monopoly on rare earths, and now the rest of the world, or the rest of the Western world, is looking at ways that they can develop their own supply chain so they're not relying on China, because China has been known to weaponize rare earths. In 2010, China cut supply to Japan, and prices really went parabolic. They went up by a factor of 10. And it almost appears like China is moving this direction again. We had the whole thing about the spy balloon, the Chinese spy balloon over the United States, And when the U.S. shot it down, China responded by sanctioning Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, because you do need some rare earths for defense. And so largely symbolic, but it's there anyways. They've also prevented recently manufacturing and downstream technologies from leaving the country. So again, protecting this industry that they have. And we hear every so often that there's rumblings from the Chinese government that they plan to either cut supply or throttle supply. And again, this makes a lot of Western countries, it makes them really nervous. And as you can see here, China has a big slice of the pie, or China and Myanmar have a big slice of the pie when it comes to mining. But it really changes when you look at the downstream. And China's the dominant player here. So this kind of leads me to the next slide about Jemi and the Jemi Heavy Rare Earth Project and why it works and why it's good. So first off, it's right next door to the Lone Star State. It's about 30 miles from the Texas border, and Texas is becoming a hub, America's hub for rare earth processing and manufacturing. So for example, we have the processing of rare earth ore that's coming from Mount Weld. Mount Weld is in Australia, and that's going to a company called Blue Line Corp in Hondo, Texas, which is right by San Antonio. Then we have a deal between MP Materials and General Motors in Fort Worth, and of course the Tesla factory in Austin. So we're starting to see a critical mass of downstream providers in Texas. And so if I can use the old adage that location is everything in real estate, well, you can say the same thing about this project. Mexico also has a long history of mining, a skilled workforce. There aren't really any heavy rare earth projects in North America, and the grades are significantly better than the Chinese projects. Okay, so how did we get here? How did we get to getting this project? Well, we optioned this from Discovery Silver. They were in this area looking for CRD deposits, and they thought what they saw was rhodochrosite, but in fact it was a mineral called eudialyte, and eudialyte is which hosts most of the rare earths in this project. They're both the same color. They're both this nice pink color. And the project itself is about 3,600 hectares. It's road access, very easily accessible. And in the area, we also have silver mines. The First Majestic La Encantada mine is about 20 miles away, and there's also several fluorite mines in the area. In terms of the project, the option agreement, it's quite generous. So earning in 100% by spending $2 million and $500,000 in stock by March 2024. So now if we get into some of the geology of Jemi, what we see here is that Jemi follows this trend of alkaline bodies that goes from about eastern central Mexico all the way up to Bocan Mountain here, which is another peralkaline deposit. And along that trend, there's alkaline. You tend to see a lot of alkaline rocks all the way through here. Now, of course, not all of them are going to be rare earth enriched, or they're not going to be rare earth deposits or projects. But it's quite a large alkaline belt that this falls along. So the project itself, right here, Jemi, it's about 9 kilometers by about 12 kilometers. So it's this sort of ellipsoid core ranging from anywhere from felsic to mafic in nature. And what we see as well is we see dikes at the margins right here. And that's where we're most interested in, because that's where you get the most fractionated rocks that tend to have your rare earths, host your rare earths. The intrusive complex itself has intruded into sedimentary Cretaceous rocks. And so we see skarn in the area, we see marble, and we do see little carbonate replacement type deposit, or deposits is a strong word to use, but showings, but nothing of any interest other than the rare earths here. Okay, so what are peralkaline rocks? So by definition, they're where you've got sodium plus potassium is greater than aluminum. And these rocks could be silica oversaturated, so something like a granite or a rhyolite. They could be silica saturated, so something like a syenite. And they could be silica undersaturated, so something like a nepheline syenite. Now these magmas and the way that these form are where you've got mantle upwelling, and you've got partial melting, plus you get extreme differentiation and prolonged differentiation. And what you tend to see is these hyperalkaline or hyperagpaitic rocks that form at the surface. Now, if you're wondering why I've got a video here of a beer, it's because this is kind of the way that I like to explain it. What we have when we see this peralkaline type of mineralization, it's the foam on top of the beer is the way I like to explain it, because it's the last gasp of the system. So rare earth elements don't like to go into the chemical structure of most minerals. So they kind of get excluded as you differentiate, as you fractionate, and then you get to the very top of the system where they have no choice, but they have to fall into some sort of minerals that generally have chemical formulas that are this long and extremely odd names. So what we think we have at Jemi is a system like this, where we've got a magma chamber here with agpaitic rocks that are like a layered type of intrusion. And then what we're seeing right now when we're doing our exploration are these dikes and sills at the near to the surface. And here's just a very small example of what I'm talking about, of that layered type of intrusion, or that layered type of texture, where you've got the dark rocks, you've got the agerine, then you have the light rocks here, the pink material, or the pink rocks or minerals being the eudialyte, and you see that repeating over and over and over again. You also tend to see it in dikes like this that are up to 10 meters in diameter, which is great to see. We don't see it. We need to see more of these, and so that's part of the reason why we're drilling. And you also tend to see it in situations like this, where it looks like the eudialyte magma has squeezed into any kind of void space, fault, fracture that it can find. Because when you get to that foam on the beer, it's actually has quite a low viscosity, and so it kind of squeezes into any kind of nooks and crannies it can find. Now, when we go back to the chemistry of these rocks, what we can see is that when we are in the peralkaline phase here of an aluma saturation diagram, that's where we're getting our highest rare earths. So right here, I've got dysprosium oxide that I'm plotting, but if you were to plot terbium or neodymium or praseodymium, you'd basically say the same thing. So as these rocks become more and more peralkaline, then the concentrations go up, and to the point where we have almost 1% total heavy rare oxides in some of our rocks. Okay, so if we take a look, we just kind of consider what we're doing now for exploration, and we've done geophysics, we've done airborne radiometrics and airborne magnetics, and what we've seen here when we look at the 3D magnetics is we see that we've got these what appears to be these intrusive bodies. They stand out quite well compared to the blues and the greens, which would be the limestones and the shales and the sedimentary units. And that seems to correlate very well with what we see at the surface and what's been mapped. It's been mapped as pegmatites, been mapped as nepheline syenites, and been mapped as some of the larger dikes. So what we think we've got right here is that this is the roof of the system. What we're looking at is the surface is here, And then when we plan to do our drilling in June, is we want to drill into this right here, this area right here, and see if we can identify and the source of these dikes and sills. Okay, so I've got a little video here. I'm just going to hope this works. Hey, perfect. Okay, so here we go. We come up over this ridge, and we see these kind of onion layers right here. And this would be your pegmatites. It would be your cyanites. You've got this white material. That would be your altered limestones. Then you've got your cap rocks over here, which would be your granites or your rhyolites. And then we go back along the intrusive complex again. We see these sort of rocks here. Again, your pegmatites, and you're getting that same kind of orientation for these, just along the major intrusive body. And then you get these either skarn or marble again. And so what we want to focus on is areas that are close to this, but also, and maybe potentially even drilling into these marbles, because in several locations we see marbles, but we don't see a large enough heat source to be able to make those marbles. So we think that perhaps the magma chamber that would be hosting the dikes that we see at the surface might be below this area. Okay, so if we look at comparables and peralkaline deposit comparables, I've just got a few up here. So we can look at Norra Kärr in Sweden. We can look at Nachalacho in Northwest Territories, Boken Mountain in Alaska. It's pretty hard to see on this screen, but if we take a look at the scale, these are about 1/5 the size of this intrusive complex. So this is quite a large intrusive complex that we think that we have, and we think that there's something pretty significant down there that we'll see in the next month or so when we start drilling. Just a quick slide here on the company's structure. We have about 57.5 million shares out. We have about 3.2 million in the bank, so we have money to do what we need to do, and we are quite well positioned in the sense that we have a very small number of retail investors, and a lot of our investors are institutional, close associates, families and friends, or some of the companies that we have entered into joint venture agreements with. So just to highlight the company, share structure, we have some very technical team. So myself, we've got an individual named Fritz Rydell, Chris Raffel, and Mark Saxon that's sitting over there in the corner, who used to run the company that had the Norra Kärr project, and been able to give me a lot of help technically. Favorable economics. We think about the location of the Jemi project on the doorsteps of Texas, this rare earth hub, and then the option for 100% ownership of the Jemi project. And so if you have any questions, I'm happy to chat with you after, or I'm happy to, if you want to send me an email or give me a call, I'm always happy to chat, especially if it's something technical, because that's kind of the most fun part, right? And that's all I've got today. So thank you very much.